Hi everyone, my name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Pilates Lounge Podcast. Now this episode comes from you fresh off the back of a podcast that I just did for a group of runners. And so then I thought, you know what, I'm going to come on here and discuss some of these ideas with you as well. Because, sometimes when we work, like as a Pilates professional, and I work every day with bodies, talking bodies through movement and stuff, sometimes we can lose sight of people, what other people might perceive the body as, or what actually happens in the body. And then when we have these conversations with people who are not Pilates instructors, who are not Pilates professionals, I think that it's a great reminder of how important our job is, but also of the conversations that we could have with other people and how language is so important. Now, when I just spoke on this group meetup for this group of women runners, some of the questions were around how can I strengthen or how can I work some of the finer muscles or some of the deeper muscles instead of the global muscles. And if you had asked that question to me 20 years ago, then my answer would be very, very different to what it's about to be now. So back in the day, I would have talked about, the importance of pelvic floor and transverse abdominals and them working as your stabilizers, and you've got to first connect with them and then work your global muscles. That's really the conversation that I would have had with you. But today, it's a very different conversation because my understanding of the body is very different to what it was 20 years ago. So, of course, that question came up. How do I know that my core muscles are doing their job? And how can I stop my big muscles from doing so much work and get my core muscles to do their job? Well, newsflash. You don't get to turn your core muscles on or off when you're running. And you certainly don't want your big global muscles not working when you're running. This is now how I think of the body. Whatever it is that you're doing right this minute, whether you are sitting in the car, driving, taking the kids to school, whether you are sitting down, having a cup of tea or coffee, if you are on your reformer at home, having your little workout while you listen to this, or whether you're walking down the beach or along the street, every single muscle in your body right now is working at an exact appropriate tone of what it needs to be working for you to be performing the task that you're performing. No one muscle in your body is not working, and no one muscle in your body is working. Every single part of your body, every cell, every fiber, every being, every part of your being is working the way that it should, ideally. Unless, of course, you are feeling pain, discomfort, if you're injured, or if you have a compensatory pattern, then your muscles or your body may not be working efficiently or effectively or optimally, but it is still working at the appropriate tone for you to perform the task that you're doing right now. So even if you have an injury, even if you are in pain, your body is still doing whatever it can to support you or to allow you to do what it is that you want to do. So Pilates does not work the finer muscles and then the global muscles. What Pilates does, and the way that I teach now compared to how I used to teach, was very different, and thank goodness my Pilates teaching has evolved after 20 years. Goodness me, it'd be like, can you imagine learning how to bake a cake or learning how to make scrambled eggs when you're 10 years old and then still doing them exactly the same way when you're 40 years old. Well, you hope that your cooking skills have improved. So my teaching skills have improved and my understanding of the body has evolved. And now when I work with a client, whilst I do discuss what the core muscles job is and why they are so important and why they may not be working well or why they may be working too much or too little, whatever it is for the person, it's certainly not a focal point. It's not like I teach them how to switch the muscles on and then get them to make sure the muscles are on with everything that they do. For a lot of people, when they first start Pilates with me now, I create a space in the studio and I make time for them to lay down, stand or sit, whatever it is that is most appropriate for their body in the moment, so that they can allow for fascial tension to reduce or to alleviate any undue tension in their body before we get going. So no longer am I looking at the body from a muscular standpoint, and I'm more looking at the body as a whole. And I know that that is precisely what my teacher training was trying to get me to do, but 20 years ago I wasn't ready to understand that, or I couldn't grasp that concept. And I think this is where a lot of us start, because what happens is when we start our teaching journey as Pilates instructors, we are introduced to the names of the muscles and the joints and the bones and the attachment points of the ligaments and tendons. And we're putting names to all of these things because we're learning a new language. But once we learn the language, then, and we want to converse about the body, we no longer need to use those foundational words or the foundational structures of the language that we have learned. I hope that makes sense. So now I'm no longer having to necessarily use individual muscles of the body. I know where they are and I understand what their job is and what tasks they're helping you perform. But what I'm looking at and what I'm looking for is ease of movement and good function of the body as a whole. Yes, that good function is based on proprioception, so your understanding of your body in space, of good joint placement or appropriate joint placement, of good movement patterns or efficient movement patterns. But, and get this, that may not be the same for every unique individual, because we are just that. We are completely unique. Our experience in our body is completely unique. So, for example, I'm working with a young girl who has a prosthetic limb. Well, her gait pattern, the way that she walks, has changed dramatically now that she, instead of having her own leg that she was born with, she now has a man-made leg. Her body has had to adapt to that change. And so I work within that adaptation. I allow for that adaptation. I allow for the compensatory patterns that have had to emerge so that she can get on with her life. We don't spend the entire time making sure that she is in perfect alignment. We make sure that she is moving in a way that gives her the strength, the mobility, the flexibility, and the dynamic stability so that she can go to the mall with her friends, so that she can relearn how to ride a bike. so that she can get in and out of the swimming pool without a prosthetic on. They're the things that we're working on. So I no longer am looking at these tiny little finer muscles in detail. Oh, this is what your multifidi is doing. Oh, this is what your pelvic floor is doing. This is what your transverse abs are doing. Because you know what? I don't actually know. I can only take an educated guess as to what may be happening. But first, what I've got to do is unravel what may be over happening so that other things aren't working. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So when I was talking to this runners group and they're asking, what are some things that I can do to make sure that my core is strong? Well, let's take running, for example. Running, you're moving in a very linear pattern. So the same pattern over and over and over again in a sagittal plane. You're moving forwards, ideally. It's almost like you're in a matchbox moving forwards, right? Your limbs are not going out. You're not abducting your limbs. You're just going forwards. So things that you can do to improve, in inverted commas, the core, but I actually think of just improving the dynamic capacity of your body in general. So really Pilates becomes the cross trainer. Things that I would do in a Pilates studio for somebody who's running is skater on the reformer or on the core line, splits on the reformer or the core line, any of the side lying stuff, anything side lying, to really work those lateral muscles that are going to hold you upright. But we're cross-training muscles, abductors, adductors, hip extensors. We're working on good rotation and good lateral flexion because they are movements that you're not doing when you're running. And if you only run and you do nothing but run, maybe you walk as well because you've got to get around for the rest of the day, but you do nothing but run, then you become very wound up in that direction. And that is where we start to see things like ITB discomfort, or even plantar fasciitis, foot pain, or bursitis. These things happen because the fascia becomes too wound up. What we want to do is mobilize the limbs, mobilize the joints in opposite directions as well. And what we want to do is hydrate the fascia. How do we hydrate the fascia? With movement. How do we move? We move everywhere. We're omnidirectional. We're not designed just to go forwards. We're designed to pick apples off the tree, pick berries from the ground. We're designed to dig holes. We're designed to throw fishing nets. We're designed to climb up and down rocks. We're designed to be able to walk around without our shoes on many different surfaces. So a lot of what we've talked about today for the running group was get your shoes off. How is the health of your feet? Because I don't know about you, but if you have a look around at people that are running these days and they've got these ridiculous shoes that have such a massive lift on them at the back, so the shoe actually rolls forwards. The shoe is running for you rather than your body running. Get your shoes off and walk down the beach, walk on the rocks, walk on the grass, walk on nature without any shoes on, and make sure that you've got really strong feet before you put your feet in those shoes that are going to restrict any kind of proprioceptive feedback through your body. So when we're thinking of these intrinsic versus global muscles, really what we're looking at is dynamic movement, is moving in every single direction that every part of your body is able to move in. Remember that Pilates really, the foundation of Pilates was calisthenics. So it's moving in all different directions. So when we are working with somebody and they come in and they're like, oh, well, I need to strengthen my core, I'm asking them, well, show me what it is that you're currently doing. And quite often, if they're at the gym, if they're running, if they're swimming, if they're riding a bike, they're moving very much in one direction. And we want to help facilitate them to reach out further, to reach in the opposite direction, to reach in other directions. That is what is going to improve our core. So, well, if we think of, as far as Pilates is concerned, some people call it the powerhouse. If we think of the center of the being, right in the middle of the body, but then we need to be very expansive. So where can you reach your arms and legs in all different directions? Almost imagine like you're a jellyfish floating around in the ocean, or you're some seaweed kelp floating around in the ocean. Allow for your body to move in all directions. And then, specifically for the runners, we talked a lot about your diaphragm. So your diaphragm being your breathing muscle. You know, when you're running, you're breathing efficiently for running, but it's probably shorter breaths than what your diaphragm is actually, the full capacity of your diaphragm. So cross-training for a runner to get stronger in the core, the diaphragm being one of those core muscles, is actually deep breathing exercises. So we talked about doing things like cat-cow or mermaids, or laying on your back and really breathing into your entire rib cage, feeling your whole rib cage expand while you're breathing in. So maybe you could breathe in for a count of 8, hold it for a count of 8, breathe out for a count of 8, and really exercising the full capacity of your diaphragm when you're not running, so that then you don't get so tight in your thoracic. And I think that it's super important. And I remember when I spoke to Madeline Black, and that was a long, long time ago. I can't even remember what the episode was called, but definitely when I spoke to Madeline, and she talked about the importance of language and how we really need to be changing language, and we need to be very considerate of the language that we're using, so that the words that we are using is actually matches what it is that we're trying to teach. So if we're going to talk about the core, understand exactly what the core is, why it's so important, and what dynamic stability looks like, what dynamic stability is for that person, for that unique individual. And because everybody comes into the studio, so many people come into the studio telling us that they need to improve their core tone because they've been told by somebody who knows more about the body than them that they need to improve their core tone. But what does that even mean? Because improving their core tone may not necessarily mean that they've got to get tighter in the core. Maybe it means that they've got to have more capacity in the core. For example, their breathing muscle. Maybe they need to breathe better. Maybe they need to get stronger in the eccentric tension, but allow for the concentric tension to release. So remember, the eccentric is that the muscle is toned, but the muscle is lengthening as it's toned. Do they actually need to work more on that and not just that elevation of pelvic floor? So when I elevate my pelvic floor, I can feel that it gets shorter. But without just bearing down and pushing out, can you allow for the sits bones to widen? Is pelvic floor still working when my sits bones widen? Well, of course. If I'm alive, if I'm breathing, if there's blood going around my system, then my muscles are working appropriately. If I don't have spasticity in my muscles are working appropriately. But even then, because we are uniquely individual, we've got to work with the person that is in front of us. I really hope that this brings a little bit of light to the way that you look at the body tomorrow when you're working with somebody, but the way that you appreciate your own body. The person who was hosting this runners group, she said, you know, how has Pilates changed your life? And I don't often ask myself that question, but I hear from a lot of clients how it changes their lives. So I had to think about that just for a moment, and then I realized, you know what Pilates really gives me? It's given me permission to love myself. It truly has given me permission to love my body. And that's a pretty cliche thing to say, I know, but what I mean by that is Pilates has taught me, and I say this often to my clients now that I think about it, Pilates teaches us to listen to the whispers of our body so that it doesn't have to end up shouting. So if you've got plantar fasciitis, or if you've got ITB issues going on, or if you've got bursitis, that didn't happen overnight. Your body whispered to you for a little while, or maybe for a long time, I don't know, but it definitely was speaking to you, and you either ignored it or you didn't know how to hear it. Pilates gives us permission to actually listen to the whispers, and then when we listen to the whispers and the body speaks to us, we are able to action much quicker what the body needs so that we can get over whatever it is that we've got going on. And most of the time, what I've noticed, most of the time, it's not that we need to do more. It's either that we need to do different, or it's that we need to allow for the body to unwind before we do what it is that we want to do. So, for example, when I was talking to the runners today, we talked about how much time, so after you've run, obviously that gets your whole nervous system becomes very engaged. As far as your nervous system is concerned, it's, you could be running from a saber-toothed tiger. You're running for your life. That's why we love the feeling of running, or people that run, that's why they love the feeling of running. But then what are we doing to come down from that? Because, well, that feels great to do it. Your nervous system, for your body to be able to recuperate, and for your body to, for your fascia to continue to glide and slide, which is what fascia needs to do so that we're not all wound up, then you do need to recuperate from that. So you need to definitely be hydrating, much more than what we probably think that we need to be. We need to be moving in other directions. We need to do something to alleviate that tension that we've just wound up, or let go of that tension that we've just wound up before we go and do something like sit at our desk for the rest of the day. There's no point doing any form of exercise, whether it's running, going to the gym, a Pilates class, and then just going and sitting all day. You really need to come down from whatever it is that you've done, let the body unwind a little bit, and then you could go and sit down, because especially if you've done something very hard, like heavy weights or running, as your muscles start to cool down, then they will end up kind of just being stuck in that shape. And if that shape happens to be wound up and really pumped up, then that's why why runners who have a desk job end up with very tight hip flexors, because their muscles are wound up, then they're going to sit down for long extended periods, I would say, a lot of the time. So then we need to be cross-training or cross-releasing those muscles before we go and do something like sit down for extended periods. But I would love to know from your experience, from your education, from your standpoint, how has your language changed around things like intrinsic muscles and the core? Are you still honing in on them, or have you recognized that we've moved on from that? I said to this runners group, because she wanted to talk about it, and I was like, oh yeah, it's probably what I would have taught you 20 years ago, but not anymore. And she was like, oh wow. So, I think that there is still that flavor going around, that we've got to work those intrinsic muscles. You know what? Those intrinsic muscles, those deeper muscles, they're going to do their job if we make movement available to them. And a lot of the availability and the way that Pilates works isn't necessarily by actively switching on those core muscles and doing something, but it's giving the body permission to recognize those muscles. So Pilates is and always has been based on mindful movement. So it's never been about, okay, well, lay there, switch on your core muscles and then lift your leg. It's never been about that. It's been more about lay there, feel how the back of your pelvis is wide in the mat, feel how the back of the rib cage is wide in the mat. Take a deep inhale, exhale as you float your leg. It's not about bracing or switching on the core. It's about just being aware of the movement that you're performing, and because of the awareness, because of the mindfulness, then your structure and your muscles and your joints and everything, all of your tissues, all of your cells, they're all working better because, get this, fascia, and Pilates very much is about fascial health. Fascia is consciousness. And if fascia is consciousness, fascia is part of our communication system. We almost need to be in a space where we are listening to the body, we're communicating with the body, we are internally assessing the body while we're moving for fascia to be healthy. And so the magic of Pilates isn't because we switch on these tiny muscles. The magic of Pilates is that we're learning to communicate with ourselves through movement. And that, my friend, is the magic of what we do. That's all I've got for you today. It's really just a few musings of this conversation that I had with these runners. And maybe they were ready for that conversation, maybe they weren't, because, this is what I do. As a Pilates professional, I live and breathe body, mind, spirit, all of the things. So to me, this is just a normal conversation. But I know to some of them, they're like, what is she even talking about? That fascia is consciousness. What does that even mean? Well, what does it mean? What does that mean to you? And have you even explored that concept? If you haven't explored that concept, I really invite you to start to ask those questions and start to explore, because there's so much that we are learning about the body right now. There's so much that it becomes more and more fascinating every single day. This is what keeps us going every single day. Yes, those intrinsic muscles are working, but the whole point isn't whether or not they're working. The whole point is, are you aware of them working and how they're working, and what does that mean to you? Love you guys. Thanks for joining me. My name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional. Have a great day. See you now.